two?
Yeah, one's gonna be.
Is it four minutes? A little muggy.
A little bit.
Fine. Those ties. I noticed you're into the pledge.
Yeah, that's one of the, that shit, no idea.
Your wife buy it?
No, the shirt, tie it, nothing.
Oh, okay, I'm calling to order, I forgot about that. Call the meeting to order and ask everybody to please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to welcome Lakshmi.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being with us. You will be starting with us on the first day of school teaching math.
Yep.
And thank you for being with us. And as we appoint you this evening, we all give you a warm welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Math and what grades?
Middle school.
Thank you.
Welcome.
You're welcome.
So with that, I will take a motion for the election of the president of the Jericho Board of Education.
I nominate Dr. Balachandra.
Nomination.
Please nominate Dr. C.V. Balachandra to be president.
I'll do it. I respectfully decline. I'd like to nominate Jill Citron.
I'll second the nomination.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
No, we need to have a discussion first.
Sure.
I'd like to understand, I believe that for this current board session, Dr. Balachandra is best qualified to serve as president, and I really say I'm very disappointed that Dr. Balachandra is turning down that nomination, and I'm just disappointed. Would love to ask if Dr. Balachandra has any reasons as why she wouldn't want to serve as president, because I think given her performance over the last 3 years that she was on the board, that she was just reelected with the largest amount of votes. She's proven herself to be an excellent public speaker. She's been someone who, while at times quiet, has served to be a uniting force on the board, as opposed to someone who at times has been, in my opinion, overly divisive by inserting herself in an election. She's always sat on the sidelines over the last 3 years, not publicly come out and push for candidates, which I think is important for unifying a board and building a board that's going to work well together. I think that she has certainly my confidence in, effectively running meetings and keeping the order of the meeting. And I think she's shown, excellent judgment over those 3 years. And I think at that point, there have been some who have been concerned about the temperament of our meetings. I don't know if you can use temperament about meetings, but the general discourse of our meetings. And I think Dr. Balachandra, for the whole entire Jericho community, would represent a welcome change to doing that. And I think she brings a lot of the skills that would make her an extremely effective president. So, given that I am so disappointed, I was hoping that Dr. Balachandra might help assuage my disappointment and explain why she wouldn't want to do that job.
Sam, I truly appreciate those words. And I'll leave it at that. There are several reasons why I do not feel that I would be the best person for this job. Most importantly, I don't think that I have the time available to dedicate to such a position, to do it justice. I think Jill would be an excellent person to continue in this role because of her vast experience with the district in this role, her ability to communicate with most, if not all of us. She's intelligent, she's compassionate, and I'd really like to see her continue in this role.
I appreciate your comments. I agree that she's intelligent and compassionate, or whatever word she said. I just think that when I look at this objectively, you're just a vastly superior candidate, Dr. Balachandra, and I think, look, like I said, if you don't want to do it for whatever reason, that's clearly your right. And I just wanted to express my disappointment. I wanted to nominate you because I think you are the best person for the 23-24 school year to do this job. I think all of us signed on for a decently large time commitment from this. I do believe, I think I understand the role of president, and I would hope you'd understand it wouldn't be a meaningfully greater time commitment. And I think by using your tremendous skills to get the board to work more closely, more smoothly, the overall time commitment for all of us would actually go down. And like I said, I'll leave it at that. If you don't want it, you don't want it, and I'm very disappointed to hear it.
So therefore, we have a motion on the floor. What was the motion? Motion is to appoint Jill Citron as president of the Board of Education. All those in favor? 5-0. The meeting is yours, Ms. President. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I appreciate the election. Thank you. Do I have a motion for the appointment of the vice president?
I nominate Mrs. Jennifer Martinoff for vice president.
I was nominating Divya Balachandra for vice president.
Does that?
I think we have to have-
Do we vote on that first?
Only if there's a second.
There's no second?
Oh, so there's no
Is it-
second, it's Chris, is that how, I mean, sorry,
Yeah.
Steve.
I think Mrs. Balachandra even understands this already.
This is so rude. Sam,
I feel like we're witnessing bullying, and it's so upsetting sitting here. I can't sit here with him.
So is there
Is there a second?
am I allowed to second myself?
Yeah, I'm for support. I mean, this is, the way you could do it is have it hold like an election as opposed to, oh, there's no microphone here. So, the way it's done in other districts is they take nominations, they just do a straw poll, and whoever wins, then they do the nomination to approve that. Sorry. So you can
So
either.
we don't have to vote on
You
Jen?
don't have to do
Lee,
vote,
and then-
yeah, you can just say, okay, nominations, Vince Vartanoff, nominations of Balachandra, and then vote, whoever has the most votes wins. It needs a majority, so it needs to be
Got
three people vote yes.
Got it. Okay.
So,
There's two nominees, you can,
can I second the nomination for Divya, or we don't need to do that?
you could second the nomination for Debbie.
Okay, I second the nomination for Divya as vice president.
So there's-
Okay, then-
There's two nominees.
Right, well, they're not. Did you second herself? Did she second
Jen
herself?
second herself. Okay, so, all in favor of Jen?
Don't we get to discuss?
Sure.
I'd just like to understand from Dr. Balachandra, why is it that the commitment as vice president is acceptable, but the slightly extra commitment of president would be unacceptable to you? And like I said, I actually think you'd be a great president. I think your efforts are wasted as vice president. I just would like to understand, if time commitment was the main thing, why would you accept a position as any officer if that was the issue?
She doesn't want to answer that.
Sam, I think even you understand that the president does do a lot and has to be present for a lot of events. And I simply do not have that time commitment, that ability, the time to commit to it. which is not to say, going back to what you said before, I shy away from opportunities to be engaged. I've pretty much showed up at every event throughout the district in the last 3 years and even longer than that. So, I think that this position position of president deserves to be Jill, and I would like to take on this position as vice president. I do not feel like it is a large commitment. And again, in title, yes, it's a title, but we are each one of 5 and equal voices and equal power on this board, so.
Any further discussion? All in favor of Jen Bartenoff as vice president? 2, all in favor of Divya Balachandra as vice president? 3, congratulations, Divya. Should we do 3 through
36.
Oh,
Steve, no issue in consent agenda 3 through 36.
okay, but I wanted to table one of the policies.
And it's obviously, point of order, if anyone wishes to remove any of the items from the
Okay, so the suggestion is to approve 3 through 36. I'm gonna ask to accept 17. Does anyone want to accept anything else from the,
I'd like to accept appointment of school district attorney for separate conversation.
Number 7.
that would be,
Number 7.
Yes, sir.
okay, so do I have a motion to approve 3 through 36 other than 7 and 17?
Motion.
Thanks, Jen. Anyone, any second?
Second.
Thanks, Sam. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so now we'll go to 7, appointment of school district attorney. Be it resolved that the Board of Education appoints Ingram and Smith LLP to serve as attorney for the school district for the 23-24 school year and authorizes the board president to execute agreement for such. Do I have a motion? Jen, I'm sorry, Divya, second. Jen. Any discussion?
Yes. Aaron Smith has been this district's attorney for many, many years. I think that there comes a time when there's not necessarily a change needed, but that it is incumbent upon this board and upon this district to solicit RFPs from other firms that would be interested in doing this business. This is common practice. I think there are benefits to having a firm such as Ingerman with their stellar reputation and their great lawyers who know our district well. At the same time, I think there's reasons to solicit RFPs and potentially change individual lawyers at Ingerman or Ingerman as a whole. And I think that is something that this board has looked at, and I think it's appropriate to say I've encouraged this board to look at. And I think unfortunately, it's come where it's come late here. I think that obviously we need an attorney today to be here. I think this board needs to seriously consider how we go about evaluating our law firm's performance and the need to hire someone else. I think that we've seen at some of our public meetings, we've had some incidents where I do not believe the board has received the best guidance. I think where procedure has been inconsistent with what should be done, where policy put forward has not been commensurate with what the operating and just the general tenor of what a Jericho board meeting and a Jericho community member would want to see. And I think some of those problems have become exacerbated or have been exacerbated over the past 12 months. And I think it's incumbent upon us to look at others. And again, I'm not saying we need to switch firms. I'm saying that we need to evaluate what else is out there because you don't know what you have until you've looked around. And I don't believe this district has looked at other law firms in many, 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 many years. And so I would encourage the board to do that. And I don't know what the procedure exactly was. I've tried to get this done before this meeting. But I think it is incumbent upon us to do this. And I think that's why we should not be voting on this contract tonight. And hopefully we can figure out a way to keep Ingerman or a law firm involved while we go through this process.
Anyone else?
Yes, Joe, we've discussed this, I think in private, and so, I think it would be fair, to give the opportunity to the entire board to put out an RFP, just to, once again, interview with other districts and see what's out there, what they can offer us. We are a top district, and we just wanna make sure that we are being represented in the best way possible, and we appreciate everything that Ingerman has done for us, and we would just, this is not a insult to Ingerman, but this is just one of our duties as board members that I believe we owe to the community. It's been, I believe, more than 10 years since we've looked at other law firms, and I think this is the right thing to do.
Okay, we'll move to the vote. All in favor of appointing Ingerman as a school district attorney for 23-24? 3 votes. All opposed? 2. Okay. Passes 3-2. 17, I would like to remove policy. Why is it not?
I believe it was regenerated this morning by Mrs. Dolce, which removed the policy that we had sent in the email.
Hang on, just want to make sure it's there or not. So 7130 is still listed here, and attendance is 7110. So, okay, so I'd like to remove 7130 from this number 17. Does anyone have a problem with that?
What does 7130 refer to?
7130 is the residency recertification, and if we don't change it, it stays in existence, so we're not required to approve it today. And we did say that we were going to reevaluate whether we want to continue to do residency recertifications for incoming 6th and 9th graders, but we don't have enough information to know whether that's been successful and fruitful. So I don't believe that it's necessary to approve that right now, so we could discuss that at a later day once we have more information.
I'm confused. 7130, absent any action by us, stays in place.
Yep,
So the only way to get rid of 7130 would be to take a vote to eliminate
correct.
7130.
So there's no need to have it on.
And with 7130, is that is one of the policies that does not require board reapproval every year.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the policies 5220, 5421, 5692, 7110, and 7310?
Motion.
Second? Chris, any discussion? All in favor? So now, that concludes the reorganization meeting. And
We need a motion to go into the regular meeting.
I'm just, I don't, in the past, we're timing okay, because in the past, we had to wait till 7:30, but now we're way over that, so, okay, do I have a motion to go into the regular meeting for July 2023? Chris? Second. Jen? Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. I'm not gonna make this to the Pledge of Allegiance again. Are there any recognitions? We already welcomed Lakshmi. Welcome you again.
And at this meeting, you will be appointed.
Where are you coming from?
I worked at Valley Stream North for 13 years.
We have a report on construction update. We asked Victor to put together an overview of our summer construction. We'd like, this would be a good time for Victor to.
Perfect.
Yes, Mr. Manuel?
Thank you, sir.
Did Mr. Manning leave a piece of paper or no, this is all verbal?
I was gonna verbalize it.
Okay,
I can send it to you tomorrow if you want.
please,
Okay.
thank you.
We have various projects going on throughout the summer. First, in this building, we are doing the middle school science and art rooms. We're planning to have substantial completion by the opening of school. That project is about 1.8 million. And what that project consisted of is basically gutting all, about 9 classrooms, starting at the end of this hall, going down the middle school, and then going to the right down that other hallway. Again, about 9 classrooms, science and art rooms. Casework is being delivered on Monday, which will fill up the hallways even more until they're ready to install it. And I say substantially complete on many of these projects. What that means is there will be probably likely punch list items that will still need to take place, but the rooms will be accessible to staff and students.
Is there any equipment needed for either of those rooms that may be on back order?
Not significant. We're still waiting for tables, but we kept the old tables just in case they don't arrive.
Any
I think
specific
there's
scientific, I assume middle school doesn't have it, but
We ordered some microscopes. We anticipate them coming in time, but
those aren't built into the room, right?
no.
Yeah, so there's no
Just
built-in.
Just the
like-
casework is built into the room, which is supposed to arrive on Monday.
Thank you.
The canopies out here will be replacing, so the demo is to take place this summer. The canopies themselves will not arrive till probably November, December, but they will take down everything, put the pavers back where it's safe. We'll put up lighting in the front, and we'll wait for the canopies to arrive. We're also doing district-wide security upgrades, and that will be ongoing through the fall. A high school, middle school roof work, so we're doing the old, new additions of both the high school and the middle school roofs, as well as the roofs on top of the pool and locker room areas. That will be substantially complete by the opening of school. That's about 2.3 million. High school, middle school window replacement, that is in the original part of the high school, about 717,000. Those will probably not arrive until January, and then we will do it piecemeal after hours. Elementary school gymnasium partitions, about 100,000. All 3 of them are being replaced, so they're not mechanical anymore. They will be complete probably the beginning of August. The elementary rooftop units totals about $2 million, and only setup work will be complete this summer. What that means is the units will probably take 16 to 20 weeks to arrive, but they'll do as much as they can set up. This way, when they do arrive, they'll have the crane take the old one off and put the new one on and do the connections at that point. Let's see, we rejected the bids for this building for the rooftop units. We're looking to either rebid or see if there is a contractor on state contract that can do it. But again, those units will take several months for that to arrive. We're doing some kitchen upgrades for the hoods in the elementary schools. And again, that should be substantially complete by the opening of school. And we're doing some miscellaneous paving that'll take place during the summer. One is the visitors parking lot over here and a few other areas. That's the update.
Basically, Victor, all of that was in your budget presentation.
That was, yes, that's part of the approvals that we do with the proposition at the budget vote on an annual basis. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Approval of minutes, be it resolved that the board make any necessary corrections and move the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting June 8th, 2023, and the executive session June 23rd, 2023. Do I have a motion? Jen, Second, Chris. Any discussion? All in favor? Opportunity for the public to be heard. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please tell us your name and affiliation if you're representing a specific group. If you'd like your statement to be included in the minutes, please hand a written comment of your remarks to Victor before speaking. As always, public discussion on matters relating to staff and students at which their reputation, privacy, or right to due process, or those of others, could in some way be violated is prohibited.
Yeah, I'm very good. Where should I go?
You can use one of these here.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some slack.
If we can get a microphone or.
Yeah, just so people that might be watching on Facebook.
Okay.
That's fine. That's fine. You can leave it.
Okay. So, I'm Ethan Brown, a rising senior at the high school. I'm gonna try to make this short because, it's summer, it's, no one wants to be here for long. I'm gonna give, some quick comments about the lack of students taking a lunch period at Jericho High School. In Jericho, students are not required to take a lunch period. Only ninth graders are, so sophomores, juniors, and seniors have the option to skip lunch. They skip eating a meal and a viable break in the day. And most students do this. They refuse to take a lunch period. In fact, the majority of high school students at Jericho do not take a lunch period. I'm sure you all have more detailed numbers about this. But from what I've seen, the majority of my peers and students don't take lunch, period. And I think this is unfortunate. Lunch periods ensure students could always have a time to eat their lunch, which is so important health-wise, especially to teenagers. The CDC recommends that schools schedule at least 20 minutes for students to have time to sit down and eat lunch. I mean, the school schedules enough time for students who want to take a lunch period. It's a normal 40-minute period, but I think the problem is that most students don't take a lunch period, and in some cases they're not able to eat lunch. Although some teachers allow lunch to be eaten in their class, many classrooms, like all science classrooms for safety reasons, prohibit lunch in class. Lunch provides, and again, this leads students to skipping at lunch in many cases. Lunch provides students a much needed break in the day, and it provides a platform to build social skills and connect with their peers. Too often, though, the reasons why students might not take a lunch period are pressure from peers, parents, and colleges to cram as many courses in the day, as many difficult courses as possible, which gives way to lunch periods and a break in the day. Being a high school student, I've witnessed this. I've witnessed my peers loading up as many courses as possible and skipping lunch, skipping eating lunch, and skipping having a lunch period. And I've witnessed the negative effects of this, the stress and of this. The board should recognize that the school, of course, needs to have strong academics, but also needs to think, do more to ensure the well-being and social opportunities for students in order to support a well-rounded and mature student body. Having lunch periods will accomplish this. So I'm asking the board to consider promoting or requiring lunch periods for students in the district. Let's make sure every student has a lunch break.
Thank you, Ethan, that was very well said. The board actually was in the process of researching this and discussing it before COVID for a couple of years, and we will put it back on the agenda to discuss again.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I was giving my.
The board had been discussing this before COVID, and we came up with doing ninth grade. That was, what we changed several years ago, and then we were gonna look to the other grades. And I know a big issue was, because you have to take college prep writing and health, I think both of those are in 10th grade. So it's hard to find space for if someone, wanted to stay on track to do do music or do like a research track. So there's a lot of logistics that go into it, so, but we will have administration, do some data, give us some data and look into it. We'll put it on the agenda
Yeah, of
to
course.
discuss this year.
I think 10th grade is, it's probably one of the most difficult grades to have lunch period because there's health and college prep writing, and that in itself takes up a whole period of 11th and 12th graders don't have that health and college prep writing, so they have an extra period each day, usually used to get electives or take more APs, and I think it might be more beneficial to their well-being, because what I witnessed from my peers, what I'm seeing, to have a lunch period instead of taking another AP. I want the board to do more to promote that, basically.
We will look into it, put it on the agenda for the year. Thank you. Anyone else? Ira?
Hey, I don't know that this is practice or custom, but when we take competitive bids, does the board know or not know of whether or not our contractors are union or non-union?
So I would, again, forever, we are the lowest bidder is the standard in municipal contracts. We are able to hire a contract who's lowest bidder, and every contractor who bids has certain requirements to meet. And one of those requirements is called prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is union scale wage. So a contractor or a subcontractor, as long as they pay prevailing wage, they meet the legal requirements that are given to us under municipal law and state education law. So we've had the RAT visit us before.
Yeah.
The RAT typically leaves us early on hot days.
Goes into the subway.
I won't say it. Basically, one of our contractors,
Yeah.
who is a very reputable subcontractor who's doing our abatement work, is non-union, however, paying union prevailing wages, with an excellent reputation in terms of the abatement work they do. We again, as a subcontractor, they meet all of the legal requirements that we have. So again, we are on firm legal ground. We work closely, obviously, with Ingerman Smith, and one of their partners is the expert in construction management, and we are 100% confident in the legalities of how we're proceeding. We expect that the RAT will, as soon as the abatement project is done within the next week, we expect that the RAT will find elsewhere.
No emails.
I think I just.
Unfinished business, staff acceptable use policy. The board adopts staff 6470, a staff acceptable use policy. Any, motion? Chris, second. Sam, any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. First reading of policy 1337. Be it resolved, the board accepts the policy. First reading of duties of school nurse, school physician, nurse practitioners. Do I have a motion? Jen, second. Chris, any discussion? I'm sorry, just want to check on.
That was your question on South Nassau?
No.
Okay.
No, that was, there was one question that we already approved this one.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Do you remember the email I sent about one of the policies that was on the agenda we already approved? I just want to make sure that wasn't this one.
It was not this one.
Okay.
We had to edit this one from last meeting. We had to make a change to B, in which we removed by the school nurse practitioner.
Gotcha, okay, right, I remember
It was
that now, okay.
1337.
And that's not on here. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Be it resolved, the board accepts the first reading of policy 3271, use of school facilities, materials, and equipment, and I know, yeah, and 3270, use of school facilities. 3270 and 3271, let's do them together. Do I have a motion? No one? Jen, thank you. Second. Divya, any discussion?
Obviously, this policy has been redrafted, and I still believe it's broken and doesn't address the issues that first came up, I lose track of time, probably around 4 months ago. And so I'm trying to understand how, I don't think it even reflects what we discussed at the meeting in June, where we talked about there should be, or I thought we talked about where there should be board approval needed for certain groups. And the second part is there's many inconsistencies in this policy that I think we need to clean up. And I'm happy to go through those now. I don't know if other board members share similar concerns about this and would like to do this, give Ingerman some specific instructions as to go back and do it, or to discuss it. Because the one issue I have is, there were two incidents that led to us addressing this policy. And I'm unclear as to Dr. Foresto's concern with how do we know that this policy is going to lead to better vetting, which I believe was what Dr. Foresto raised in one of our meetings several months ago. And what have we changed in this policy to prevent the two events that caused us to approach this policy? And I think neither of those questions are clear from this. And I believe when we talked about this in June, there was some concern that the board would have to be excessively involved in these decisions. And I think the way the conversation went was that there's really two different groups. There's community groups and non-community groups. And I don't believe this policy, while mentioning both of those constituencies, really discusses the different treatment for those, that there is confusion when you get later in as to how each works. So, like I said, I think this is going to be a long conversation. I'm happy to start doing it right now. And then I'll make the last point before I let other people speak. There's a part in here about the board, the superintendent of schools notifying the board in a timely manner. I would like to put that as the time of approach. And given that anybody using this needs to provide us, I think it was 45 days notice, as well as 4 or 5 weeks. I think they have 45 days notice, and 3 weeks prior, they have to show evidence of insurance. So that there's really nothing in here that should become any type of surprise, and there should be plenty of time for the board to meet. And so I would propose that, as I did, and as I thought it was taken and agreed to by others here, that we should talk about community groups, however we want to define them. And I think Mr. Gusset has done a good job of defining community groups as groups that are based here. And those should be ones that are, the superintendent has full discretion on. And I think that represents 98, 99% of the people who use our facilities. And that with non-community groups looking to use our facilities, and I think the definition as used in this policy needs to get altered. It's a bit confusing. I think other members here talked about it being confusing. Those types of policies, those types of groups would require explicit board approval before going forward. And as the policy states, these groups have to give us 45 days notice. So there should be no problem with the board making a timely decision on any of those requests.
I think that something that came out of this policy is that in practice, The superintendent has been sending emails to the board, letting us know when someone requests the use of the facility and giving us the opportunity to raise it as an issue. I think that I do have some comments to this policy, and we could send them offline to Ingerman, so we don't have to spend too much time here doing it. But I think that what came of this discussion was a new procedure that has been working, and I think everyone on the board is happy with how it's been going in terms of notifying us when someone asks to use a facility. And I think that there are a lot of things that are clarified in this policy that makes it better than the policy that was in advance, because it now aligns with practice more than what the prior policy was. So I'm fine if we table this and send comments to Ingerman for them to review. However, I think that your concern has been alleviated by practice.
Can you explain how this would deal with the politicization of the school district a month or 2 months ago at this point, where the superintendent provided notice on an hour's notice, basically, of an event that was going to go on here, and I believe that was the final impetus that led us to address this policy, and I'm unclear as to how this adjusted policy, and Mrs. Citron, I appreciate what you're saying, and if you would be able to point me to the language as to how we would be able to avoid another incident of that, because as I said, I think the policy is somewhat confusing, where it explicitly says that we need 45 days notice for a group to use this. Does it not say that, Mr. Nitstad? What is it?
It says 45 days is practicable. Obviously, there are some times in which events are scheduled in which you don't have the 45 days notice. So it's best practice, that's 45 days, that's the standard. But if someone comes up and says, hey, I need an event, I just scheduled this event, it's 2 weeks from now, the policy still allows that.
So then I'm curious as to how this new policy would address that situation, because I understand what you're saying, but I do believe, and I thought others agreed, that there needs to be a difference in treatment for community groups and non-community groups, because I do believe that as far as a community group, or a group such as the Girl Scouts that we've added into this policy, which I'm unclear whether qualifies as a community or a non-community group, the superintendent has discretion and doesn't even need to notify the board beforehand about those. And I don't think anyone on the board wants to know about the Girl Scouts requesting an extra meeting room or the JA requesting an extra weekend of games. But if there is an outside group, whether it be radio operators, whether it be, I'm struggling to figure out who it would be, but that the board should be required, given the bad publicity, given the politicization of district grounds a couple months ago, that I just don't understand how this policy fixes those two instances.
Listen, I listened to your last board meeting, and all these changes were made from what was said at your last board meeting. If it was said, it's in here. So to the extent that that wasn't discussed, it would not have been. If it was discussed, it would have been here in some way, shape, or form. For example, with regards to what specifically happens with non-community-based organizations, if you look on page 3, in the red line version, there's a new paragraph with regards to what happens in non-community. You cited to it before, Mr. Perlman, regarding what the superintendent has to do regarding notification in a timely manner. That differs from the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the JAA, and all that stuff. So again, if it was discussed at the last board meeting, it's in here in some way, shape, or form in order to address the concerns from the board. So again, if there are more concerns, as we've done time and time again, we are happy and ready to assist in editing these changes if necessary.
I think Mrs. Citron's suggestion of taking these changes and just submitting them to you and understanding and having a new conversation where I will give you we can go point by point, would be appropriate. I would appreciate, I know I've asked for it, I haven't gotten it yet. I would like to see the original draft that you sent, that you, I believe, prepared and sent to the district that we talked about 2 months ago, that you said wasn't representative of the conversation, though I don't know who told you that. And I've asked to see that. I haven't gotten it sent to me. Is that something that I would be able to receive?
That depends on what the board wants, it depends on what the entire board wants to do.
So, but, okay. Then I asked my fellow board members. As you may recall, a few months ago, after we had our initial meeting on this, the Ingram & Smith firm prepared a draft, which, according to the conversation at the meeting that night, was sent to the district and I believe to the board president. It wasn't sent to the four of us. We never got to see what that policy was. I would like to see what it was in the original draft, which reflected the first meeting that we had. For reasons that I'm unclear on, our law firm is telling me that I'm not allowed to see that unless the board approves. I don't quite understand, because I thought the Ingram & Smith firm works for the board, not for the district, so I'm not quite sure why they would send it to the district without sending it to the board. So I'm not gonna have an argument over what you're referring to about needing, the board to vote, but I would ask my fellow board members, only one of us has seen that original policy. I would ask that all four of us get to see that policy. It may not be necessary. What's the harm? We don't know. We don't know, Dr. Balachandra, that's what I'm saying. It is substantially different because if you recall, Ingerman wouldn't distribute it at the meeting, and it wasn't even on the agenda that night because someone said it wasn't what we had discussed. And what we do know is the policy that did come back to us the following month was certainly not what we had discussed. But whether it's not substantive or relevant, I'm asking to see it. And I'm asking for my fellow board members to support me and say that yes, Mr. Perlman can see a policy that was drafted that was inappropriately sent to the district without being sent to the board, that was inappropriately distributed only to the president of the board. Because as you said earlier, Dr. Balachandra, we're all equal here. And so why should one board member get to see it and not another board member? Why should one board member get to preemptively comment on something potentially when the other shouldn't? So I asked, Mrs. Vartnoff, Mrs. Citron, Dr. Balachandra, and Mr. Foresto to please join me in asking the Ingerman firm to send us a copy of that original policy draft.
I would definitely like to see it. I really don't understand why it's becoming an issue. So I would like to understand that as well. Is there a reason?
It's how my document is disclosed.
Whose document is it?
Again, the way policies have always worked in this district is policies come from the district, which is why they go to the district. So again, when it comes to who sets the agenda, it's the superintendent, the board president who sets the agenda and what goes on. That's the practice, that's how board presidents, that's how agendas get set. So if it doesn't go on the agenda, it's not a document for the entirety of the board. So again, if the board wishes to see a document, the board can request to see the entire document. But it's not my document, it's a district document, based on how the practice has, how it's worked.
Okay, I understand the point of not putting it on the agenda, but you clearly took comments from the district and potentially the board president to change a policy that was drafted. While you may say they put it on the agenda, they do not get to preemptively change those drafts. They do not get to see policy, redraft it, and then send it out to the rest of the board and say, oh, here, this is what the lawyers put together, because again, you're giving one board member and the district preemptive rights to review a policy. And I understand what you're talking about with practice. I actually believe, and unfortunately, Mr. Goodstead, this is completely demonstrative of why I believe this district needed to at least talk to other law firms, because you are employed by the school board. You're not employed by the school board president, you're not employed by the superintendent. And whatever practice may be, one of 5 board members, is asking to see a policy, and I'm confused as to why 3 of my fellow board members are saying no. This is purely trying to learn information.
No,
Well, Dr. Malchando, all you have to do is say yes to the policy, we can be done here. Mrs. Varnoff has said
I
yes.
would also like to clarify longstanding history that precedes Ingram and Smith, and frankly is the operating style in the districts I've worked in. Board policy adjustments are sent to central office administration for central administration's review to make sure that the policy, the draft policy, is consistent with administrative practice. In many cases, administrative practice that the Board of Education may not even be aware of. So it is not unusual, and Steve, you share, policies come to central office, and in some cases, again, we will make recommendations from Ben's office or from all the central office, special education, curriculum instruction, to make sure that the policy is consistent with practice. Before then, it's redrafted and sent to the Board of Education for review. It's not uncommon for central office to review policy before the board sees that policy.
And that's fine, and if we want to keep doing that in most cases, I'm not even discussing that right now, Mr. Superintendent. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it, but 2 points. One, that's fine. This specific one, I would like to see. And 2, Mr. Goodstack continues to talk about practice. I'm talking about legal obligation. It's the board's right to see this policy. I understand practice, and I hold a great importance to practice because I think it makes things run smoothly. In this case, I would like to see the policy. And to the superintendent's last point, one of the reasons why I am concerned about the comments going to the district first is because clearly we are talking about the balance of power between what the superintendent gets to do and what the school board gets to do. And I believe that neither of the 2 drafts we got reflected what this school board discussed.
And anything, Sam, that comes to central office is finalized by the Board of Education. So in terms of balance of power, there's no impact on the balance of power because central office reviews a policy beforehand. The board then sees the draft policy, and they're up to approve the final draft. And therefore, your concern, your consistent concern about balance of power is ultimately with the Board of Education in finalizing first reading and second reading of board policy.
And I always agree with many of your points. The issue I have is that, as anyone knows, when people read things, they don't necessarily see the changes they want to make. They read what's been prepared by an extremely smart, experienced attorney, and they say, okay, that sounds good. They don't necessarily say, oh, that wasn't what I recalled we talked about. Oh, maybe I have a different idea. And what my concern is, with everything, but specifically with this, in terms of balance of power, there was clearly something in that initial draft that the district didn't like. Was that because it didn't reflect what we talked about? Perhaps. Was it because it wasn't what the superintendent wanted to be in there? Perhaps. I'm struggling, as I always struggle. When someone says no to a piece of information, it's either they're trying to save me from wasting my time, which I always appreciate, but given that this is basically a 5-page policy and only 3 pages of it are relevant to what we're trying to talk about, I don't see that as an issue. And 2, I would like to see what Ingerman initially drafted. I'm just confused as to why that draft, I'm not saying put it in the minutes, I'm saying just send it to me. I'd like to see what's prepared.
If I may, number 1, I haven't seen this. Number 2, I personally have no issue with anybody on the board reviewing this. So I don't recall anybody telling you no. Maybe I missed that. No, okay, so let's do it.
So we're good there, Mr. Goodsat? Thank you so much.
I mean, I think it's not an unreasonable request.
Thank you.
So we are tabling policy, I guess they're tied together, so we'll look at table 3270 and 3271.
Wait, can we just comment for 2 more seconds? Because, actually, no, we're gonna send comments to Mr. Goodsat. That's perfect, thank you.
All in favor to table?
I will go to it.
Could we make a motion to appoint?
The board has recently had discussions and I think substantive discussions about establishing a board policy committee. And I just think the last half an hour is a reinforcement of my recommendation that the board continue to consider seriously establishing a board policy review committee of 2 board members working with central administration and with Ingerman Smith in drafting policies and then presenting them to the Board of Education. I think that was an excellent suggestion, I think originally made by Steve and by Chris to the Board of Education.
We have to vote on tabling that, right? Okay, do we have a motion to table the policies?
I thought we did.
Well, the motion was already made, so.
The motion was made to vote on that?
Yeah,
The motion.
it was me to vote.
Okay.
All right, so do I have a vote on tabling the policies?
While they're talking, can you find the appointment,
Okay.
the appointment of Lakshmi?
Mr. Commissioner, can you just explain why you are making this recommendation for policy committee?
I
You
think,
just said because of the last 30 minutes, what does that mean?
I think we've had public conversations about board policy that have taken up hours of our time, hours of community time, Iris time, that I think would be far more efficient if a committee could make a presentation to the board and very frankly save public discussion and limit some of the public discussion. I think we talked about that at a prior meeting, and I think there was a general agreement that that would be a more efficient way to deal with,
No.
with policy.
Well, I never agreed to that. I think it was,
I think you
it was-
my recollection is you said you'd
I
like to
said-
serve on it.
yes, I said if there's going to be a policy committee, I would like to serve on it.
Okay.
I don't necessarily agree that there should be policy committee.
Up to the board.
Yes, I understand.
making
I'm
that
just,
recommendation.
I just wanted to understand where it was coming from because we spoke about it for 5 minutes last time, so.
It's coming from the basis of the conversation we had 2 weeks ago, where we all, I thought, were in agreement that we are spending too much public time rehashing, and to some extent, I think the comment was putting in commas on board policy, which is not something that the community needs to sit and listen to.
I understand, but
That was the basis of my recommendation.
okay. I don't agree with having the policy committee, though, once again, I'm just one of 5, and I just wanna say, the public that comes to our board meetings, they wanna be here. I think most of the people, they enjoy listening to the board, talk about policy, yeah, well, once again, nobody's forcing anyone to be here, and I think this is part of the business. This is the business of the board, so I think just adding another layer of another policy committee and another layer is just, it's unnecessary. It'll shave off 15 minutes of our board meetings, and I don't know if that's gonna help anything.
Board decision.
Mr. Doucette, can you correct me, wouldn't policy committee meetings be open to the public?
Yes.
So really, it would just be not saving any public time, it would just be redirecting it to another day.
Not entirely true. The policy committee would serve as a first level of synthesizing policy to ensure to put what you said before, the voice of the board, and in conjunction with administration, so it's being discussed together. So everyone knows what's going on prior to going to the board. Then most of those issues, the commas, the grammaticals, the things that get changed with the policy committee, don't have to be discussed in public. And again, the policies still get discussed in public, because ultimately it's the Board of Education who votes on these policies for first and second reading. So what it is for the people who do serve on it, it's an additional time. But it's a process in which the policy committee can take look at the policy book and say, well, I want to revise these policies. And then they start to work on those policies, and then they bring those to the board.
The general direction of that policy. So you have a policy committee, are they dealing with the commas and the cleanup of the language, or are they dealing with what the policy says from soup to nuts?
Depends on the policy committee. And again, anything that happens to the policy committee is not binding. The board is ultimately the people that have to vote on the policy. So even with the policy committee, you still might have an hour of discourse in public, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
I agree with you.
But the fact of the matter is, it takes out a lot of the beginning issues, and it starts, you can synthesize and talk about what does the policy actually say. So, again, I serve on policy committees in 3 districts. Some of our other partners at Ingerman, we serve on policy committees in other districts. And again, it's just it's a first step to hopefully make the process more efficient.
And on the committees that you serve on, there's at most 2 board members, otherwise it becomes a board meeting.
It depends, some districts have 7 or 9 board members.
Okay, so you have,
It's
you don't have a
very
quorum
high.
of board members. Is administration typically involved?
Yes, it depends on who, some policies require certain people. If there was a business policy, you would want Mr. Madigan. If it was an education.
We want him there all the time, regardless of what we're talking about.
You understand what I'm saying?
I know. And then, what about members of the community? Would you ever have outside members of the community involved in those?
Depends. It's up to the policy committee. It's not a me decision.
I don't know, I understand, I'm just talking about general practice. You said you work on 3 policy committees.
Again, they're open to the public. I've sat on some policy committees in which the public shows up and they sit in the back and they're observers. I've had some in which they don't. It's really depending on the community at large. But you can invite whoever you want to be on the committee. That's up to the board.
And do most of those boards that have policy committees, do they have other committees also, or is the policy committee usually the only committee that they have?
It depends. Some do, some don't.
Would you say that you have more districts with policy committees or audit committees?
Audit.
But we have to have.
You have to have an audit committee.
An audit committee that's made up of people other than a couple of members of the board?
Ours is made up of the entire board.
No, I fully understand that, but my question is basically, do you have more boards that have a subsection of the full, you have more districts that have a subsection of the full board making up an audit committee? Or do you have more districts that have a policy committee?
I don't serve an audit committee, so I don't know the answer to that question.
And the last part, I think that, I understand it's the summer. I tell you, body clock-wise, it's much later for me than anybody else in this room. I think that we have the hardcore people here. I'm sure Mr. Checkler, Mr. Verderber are very interested in what these policies are, and I think they affect them, and they're interested and intelligent observers who will contribute to that. So, as Mrs. Martinoff said, people are here voluntarily, except for the 5 of us. And I do believe, given that Mrs. Citron has repeatedly said how she wants to increase community involvement and community attendance at board meetings, policy is really the most interesting thing we talk about. And it's really the only thing where we've gotten, any real feedback from the community members. So to put it onto, a non-prime time night doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. And, I think we did have a brief conversation. I certainly wouldn't call it substantive. But I really don't think it's necessary. It's 8:30 at night, and we spent 30 minutes talking about a pretty important policy that, caused a lot of headache in this district over the past 4 months.
Okay,
Can we just recommend this?
oh, sure. Okay, recommended motion to approve schedule GIA ID number 13507, that's the instructional appointments. Thank you, Sam. Second, Jen, any discussion? Malcolm?
Lakshmi, congratulations.
Congratulations. All in favor?
You don't have to leave if you don't want to.
Acceptance of first reading of policy 5660A, meal charging and prohibition against meal shaming. Be it resolved, the board accepts the first reading of that policy. Do I have a motion? Anyone?
Well, yes, I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Sam. Second, Chris, any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Adoption of district-wide safety and emergency management plan. Be it resolved, the Board of Education adopts the district-wide safety and emergency plan for 2023 school year as shown in the attached. Do I have a motion? Well, we have to do the motion.
Motion.
Jen, second.
Sure.
Chris, discussion?
I think we should pick, this is the,
This has been on the,
okay,
There's no
we're
issue.
talking about the calendar.
no, this is the safety plan.
Oh, safety plan, I thought I heard you say calendar.
No, we approved the calendar
Okay.
in the reorg meeting earlier. It was on that list of schedules. All in favor? Thank you. Be it resolved, the Board of Education to adopt the professional development plan for the 2023-2024 school year shown in the attached. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Jen. Second. Divya, any discussion?
This deals with all the continuing education for teachers, is that correct? How many total sessions are on there? Do you have it in front of you? I don't remember. How many different programs are being run on that schedule? Dozens and dozens and dozens?
Yeah, no, a lot.
It's a lot.
In service, new teacher,
Okay, good.
It's a lot.
All in favor? Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve schedules 13483 through U356? Jen, thank you. Second. Anyone? Anyone? Thank you, Chris. Any discussion? Just have to check if I have any questions.
I know there were a couple of questions that were sent in. Is it all right if I just go through?
Please.
Okay.
That'd be great, thanks.
I know one of them was on the cafeteria report, why is percent income for food cost zero?
Yes.
That is because we don't purchase the food anymore, so it goes through Aramark. And you'll see that one more time at the June one, because this year was kind of like a mix of first half of the year without Aramark, second half with Aramark. Next year, that calculation won't be there because it won't make sense anymore.
Okay.
Another question, does surplus of the Board of Ed code, $5,060, get moved or added to the following year? The answer is no, but that number will likely change because that was only through May.
Okay.
So there'll still be another month,
I mean, let's-
minimal.
Whatever, let's just say you have $100
Yeah,
left, what happens to that?
It goes into fund balance.
Okay.
Let's see. We talked about that.
Okay. Question of class of 2023,
Oh,
what
yeah.
happens to that?
The class of 2023, the class that graduates, the funds will eventually go over to the new freshman class.
To the new freshman class?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's normally what takes place.
Yeah, why
That'll
doesn't,
be,
why doesn't it go to the, to the incoming seniors now? No?
Well, they've been raising money.
Yeah.
it's been, that's just the way we've
Okay.
always done it. So the incoming senior class got the leftover from the senior class from 2019 or whatever the year was.
It's $11,000.
That could change also,
Which part?
that dollar amount.
Oh, why?
There could still be a couple of
I mean, it was
outstanding
May, right,
payments,
because, yeah, I understand.
Are we adopting a new MOU with Allied? It's not an MOU and you don't adopt it, it's, we do issue a purchase order based on, state contract. And how much did we pay Allied this past year? $662,121. I think that was everything on my end.
Any other questions? All in favor of approving schedules? Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Wait, before, I apologize, we did not have a superintendent's report, I fully understand why, but I did have a couple of follow-up questions from some open issues that I was hoping we could take 3 minutes to deal with. One, as the superintendent is in charge of the agenda along with the board president, policy 3220, which was tabled at our June meeting, did not appear on the agenda this month. It is now, are any of those changes officially dead, or is this a policy that we should expect to see rear its ugly head at some point in the future?
That's the public expression. I don't know why that didn't show up on the agenda either, and I would assume it would be on the August agenda.
I'm not
Did
sure
you
what's
do-
on it.
So it was supposed to be on this agenda?
I think it was supposed to be.
So,
It'll be on the August agenda.
and is it expected to, well, let me state this, and I would again look to my fellow board members to discuss this. Are we looking at adding the same draft that was on the June agenda versus something that better reflects the practice, since everybody seems to be very hung up on practice tonight, the mood, the general openness that is represented by the Jericho School District, as opposed to the, I won't even use a word to describe it, what was in that policy last month.
Well, I think we have the opportunity between now and then to send comments to each other and to Steve, and we can discuss, it's not gonna be set in stone, it'll be a reading, and we'll have the opportunity to comment on it. So if you have comments on it, you could send them to Steve and the board, and everyone has the opportunity to do that between now and the August meeting.
I'm not sure that's actually allowed that we can have an email discussion about board policy. I know that for the 3270, I was just planning on sending comments to Ingram and Smith, but I believe that as Mrs. Citron, and I defer to Mr. Goodstadt, as Mrs. Citron said, if we start emailing amongst ourselves as board members about changes to a policy, that would violate open meeting law.
Well, I'm just saying you should copy the board if you're sending them to Steve.
Again, I believe that violates open meeting law.
If there's not a discussion, there's a discussion about it itself, but you can just send the changes.
Well, no, but I'm saying that I send you changes and copy the board, and another member sends changes that in any way reflect or address the changes that I previously sent, we're now in violation of open meeting law, correct?
Send me the changes and I will put together the policy.
Okay.
But how will that work if Sam sends you changes that the rest of us don't agree with, and then you come up?
We'll have a
Public discussion.
We'll put together a new draft based on the totality of changes that proposed.
Well, I mean, are we allowed to discuss that? Oh, I guess because it wasn't on the agenda, we're not allowed to discuss it, is that correct?
You can do an add-on resolution right now.
I don't want to try to ask for anything. Mr. Superintendent, three other questions. One, students who have new ideas for additions to the curriculum in terms of courses, sports, or any other activity or club, what's the best way for them to do that? If there are certain students who want to try to get a specific class or program added to the curriculum, what's the best way for them to do that?
Discussion with curriculum associate or principal. I think more so with the curriculum associate, but with administration.
Okay, so the curriculum associate, and if they don't feel like they've gotten enough of a response from the curriculum associate, is that then the next step?
Chain of command, Sam.
And so this is not a complaint about a teacher, this is about a curriculum issue, and I don't want to get yelled at, so from the curriculum associate, would it go to Dr. Sherman?
Yep.
Thank you. There was some concern that was expressed to me. I pass it along to you to understand as the board that is extremely concerned about safety in our school. This past year, we had 3 sections, I believe, of pre-K at the Seaman School. Next year, we're going to 5 sessions. I am told, I did not observe it personally, but I am told, and I was asked to look into, there were some issues with drop-off and pickup, that it was a bit of a organized disorganization, that there were, way too many cars, way too many students, way too many people this year. And are we working on any improved or different procedures for drop-off and pickup at Seaman for the pre-K program? Nothing to do with elementary, just the pre-K.
Firstly, I think the their characterization is an overstatement, an exaggeration of safety. I think numerous central office administrators have been there at pickup and drop off. And again, I think by and large, pickup and drop off went well. Joanne is making a recommendation that there will be 2 drop off and pickup times, so she will be able to split the number of cars and kids that drop off and pick up. And a segment of the parking lot will be designated for pre-kindergarten pickup and drop off parking. So that plan is in place for the opening of school. And we expect that with the additional 2 sections of pre-kindergarten, that will work well and will be safe.
So notwithstanding the overly aggressive assumption, there was some concern on administration, and these parents should rest assured that the district has taken what we believe are appropriate steps, not for necessarily that they were worried about the safety of kids getting run over, but just that it was less than optimal. Okay, thank you very much.
No, please don't put words in my mouth, Sam. I don't think it was characterized appropriately. The reason that we're changing the pickup and drop off is because we went from 3 sections to 5 sections. So by increasing the number of kids and parents, we are revising our pickup and drop off. Very frankly, administration didn't see serious issues in health and safety in the drop off or pickup.
Okay, great. So we're adjusting it for the additional students. And then finally, is there any update on the reconfiguration of the district's DEI committee?
At this point, it is a superintendent's committee, and I'm always listening to recommendations from the committee. But right now, I've not made any recommendations to change the makeup of the committee going into year 2.
Oh, no, but Dr. Salzman said that there was turnover, that several people, including students, were dropping off, and that there would be a certain amount of turnover, and I did not know if those decisions had been made, or even more pressingly, Dr. Salzman, when he did his presentation, wasn't sure the method for replacing those people, whether it was going to be a recruitment method or it was going to be an application method the way it was last year.
It's under review, Sam. And again, I underline that the DEI committee is a superintendent's committee.
Hence, I'm asking the question to the superintendent.
And hence, the superintendent said it's under review.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I have a motion to adjourn. Chris, second, Jen, any discussion? Thank you all for coming. Have a great rest of the summer. We'll see you in August.